Hey everyone, this is Arabella back for another episode of In My Musical Opinion. From Paris, France, New York City, Boston, and now on the podcast, I'm joined by Anna Altman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Arabella. I'm so excited. And thank you for that introduction. That's awesome.
I'm excited that you're here. Whenever I'm texting Anna, I'm like, so which state/country are you in right now?
You
And
know what?
let's
Right.
figure out the time
The,
zones.
the, the funny thing is, right now I'm in Missouri, like visiting my family. So it's like,
I love it.
so I'm like an hour behind.
Anna, will you tell us just a little bit about who you are, how we know
Sure.
each other? Fill
Yeah.
us in.
Yes. So my name is Anna Emily Altman. I've always been an actor and a singer. I'm now sort of by default a movie producer, writer, film actor, and dare I say in public, possibly director. That's kind of on the table. So I just wrote a film. Well, not just, but over the course of the last year, I've been working on a full length film, which has now been sort of reduced down to what we call a proof of concept to film. To sort of test the waters of the project, get investment, all that kind of good stuff that you do to actually make a movie. Um, and it's been a really exciting, sometimes very scary ride, but it's a lot of fun. And the whole project involves a ton of music. So I've been a music lover, I think, since I got my first record player when I was, I think, 4 years old. And my father, I'm gonna show my age right now. My father had 45s for me to play on that record player. So
So, our listeners know by this point, one of the main focuses of our podcast is highlighting how musicians have more avenues and more roles than just singing and performing, which
oh,
is
super cool.
wonderful if you
Yeah.
want to do that. But as you just pointed out, there are so many different industries where you can apply your
Yeah.
music knowledge to.
Yeah.
And I think you had that intention from day one when you came into the
Yeah.
studio.
For
You were
sure.
really clear that my love is acting, my love is plays and theater. But there's this part, I think, if I learned music, that would put me ahead of the game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I always music has always sort of been my sort of everything. I think if I had to choose my favorite art, that would be it for sure. I'm a huge music fan, and definitely this movie reflects that. But I also know, I don't think I ever necessarily aspired to be a musician. I don't think I could. I think I just never thought that I could write the way that the people that I looked up to could write. But it turns out I can write a movie. Um,
There you go.
so I think like my always my motivation was to meet people in the industry, to make my instrument better, and to learn really sort of the language of music a little bit more clearly so that I would understand whenever I was in a situation, whether it would be, a musical performance opportunity, a studio, or in this case, obviously, like writing a little bit and collaborating with musicians on sort of the genre and music that I want for this movie. I just wanted to know more about it, and the studio was the perfect and continues to be the kind of perfect place for it.
That's awesome. I want
Yeah,
to ask you a little bit about the part where you're talking about um, you wrote this story around music and you're sort
yeah.
of filling in different roles now, director. I know at one point you were looking for someone to help do like the musical landscape of the
Yeah,
film as well.
yeah.
Tell us about that. How did you go
Uh,
about doing that?
yeah, that unfortunately hasn't been perfectly successful at this point. So we only needed it, luckily, for the promo video, which wasn't for any kind of monetary use. So we were able to use cuts of, is Richard Ashcroft listening to this? We were able to use like little cuts of like the Verve music, which is, what we're kind of aiming for in terms of sound. So it hasn't been perfectly successful. So that's a hunt that I'm about to be on. It's a really, it's a, that is something that's so multifaceted because you're looking for people who have a musicians who are able to work within the confines of a genre of music, but also able to completely be creative within those confines, which can be very hard for an artist. I think any artist, right? So, myself included, I never wanted to be like a writer on a show because I never wanted to work inside the confines of like somebody else's idea. So I think it can be difficult. So there's like you recommended a couple of platforms and places to look. And again, you're sort of dealing with like, okay, am I looking for perfection here? Or am I looking for like something that just sounds the way that I want it to sound? And how much of us like my lyrics are involved as well. So then that is even more of sort of a restriction, I guess, which I hate to use when we're talking about art, but the lyrics are important. They're important to the story, which is why I wrote them. So it's if somebody has a better idea, I'm always open to it. But right now, they are working lyrics for what we're kind of looking for. So it can definitely be a little bit tricky on both. I think on both sides. And like I said before, it hasn't been a perfectly successful venture at this point. So for anybody listening, we are looking. we are
You heard it
actively
here first.
we are actively looking for musicians for hire. So for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean this respectfully, of course, but I really love that you said, it hasn't been totally successful yet because
Yeah.
I think that so often listeners think if you see it online, it was a one and done thing,
Yeah,
where
for sure.
really it's
It's
like
like
take 100, where
right,
you're
exactly. It's like it's my father used to always say, like it's an over. There's no such thing as an overnight success. There's no such thing as you've gone through a million. I'm on the 31st rewrite of a full length feature of this. You know what I mean? It's like this isn't something that happened as like oops, oh well. I just ended up here. It's like this is years and years in the making. So you make a lot of mistakes. I mean, you know, and you pay for things sometimes that don't work out and you know that you're making that deal. So
Yeah, and well, I would say too, sometimes I'll pay for something on the platforms that we've talked about or elsewhere, and I'll get upset for a second because I'll think, oh, that didn't really work, and I spent money on it. But
yeah.
then, a year or two later, I was like, well, that actually would work here, or I'll just take a
Yeah.
cut of that. So I always put
Yeah.
it like in the drive
Yeah,
to use
exactly.
later on.
For sure, for sure. I think that's like anything, it's like I purchased studio time a while back in Boston to record, and that kind of didn't work out. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I can get the money back from that. And that's not happening. So I'm like, okay, but now I'm looking at I'm like, you know what? I'm probably gonna need that studio time at some point. Because I'm like,
Right.
we're gonna need to do recording. And guess what? That's like $500 I won't have to spend. So,
Yeah.
so it's like it's always I think every time you like take a chance and you try a new experience or something different. I got to sit in a recording studio and work with a couple musicians in New York a few weeks back, a few months back before we did the promo video for the fundraising campaign, and that was an experience that I really loved having. And they were great musicians and they were really fun. We haven't ultimately used that piece yet, but like we may.
I thought the promo video came out great. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks.
It
Well,
seemed like everyone was having fun in it, which, that's
we were. I didn't. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing except for maybe Lee. And Melissa, who was running the show, Melissa Center, who's my co-EP, and she like pretty much ran the fundraising campaign. And Lee Mansella, who happens to be an editor for the New York Times, he's the real deal. And like but for me, I was just like I had no idea what was going on most of the time. I was just doing what like and laughing about it. But it was really fun. We had a good time. We were in Riverside Park that day in New York City, so it was great.
yeah. I had a little bit of nostalgia watching it and all the New York
Nice,
scenery.
nice.
For our listeners, I'm from the New York, New Jersey area originally, although now I view Boston as my home, but I was watching, I was like, I know that park. So
Yep,
it hit home for me quite literally.
awesome.
This episode is sponsored by AVS. Together, we are redefining what it means to be a musical community. Rather than a single central studio, our presence is woven into the fabric of our city. You'll find us in boutique practice rooms strategically placed at the heart of the action from Rock City Allston to across from the Symphony in Back Bay. We gather in local pubs, breweries, at local open mics, channeling our resources into getting singers out of the practice room and onto stages in the greater Boston area. I want to ask you about the writing process.
Okay.
Something I struggle with, both in writing songs and writing in general,
Hmm.
is it's not that I don't have the thing to say. It's almost like I have too much to say and I don't
Uh-huh.
know how to like structure it on paper.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
That's such an interesting question, and I think it's like I had a coach because I had never written a screenplay before. So I had a coach who asked me one time. He's like, how do you know how to get these transitions the way that you get that? Because it's a nonlinear plot line. So like one, it's not necessarily following a consecutive thing. Like sometimes we're seeing the characters in 1998, and sometimes there's different characters in the present day. And so, but somehow or another, these scenes have to feed logistically well into the next scene. And the answer was I didn't know, except it was intuition. So I think the thing is what I would want to say about that, if it gives any instruction at all, is that when you're writing, for me, the characters are the most important part. So songwriting aside for right now, and being a lyricist is a different story, kind of. It's still a story that you're telling, right?
Sure.
And so, I think like when you are looking at characters, you're taking the juice of the character and the most important pieces that are relevant to the story that you're trying to tell, and you're telling it that way. And when you've got sort of, not that you necessarily have to follow any sort of like rules when you're screenwriting, but you do have some sort of like guide there, because everything has to be impactful, right? So, and honestly, the hardest part of the whole thing was reducing 130-page screenplay into a 10-minute short, which is what we've done. And so then you really have to hone in on, okay, not only how can I make the characters pop in 10 minutes, but how do I tell the most interesting pieces of this story and be elicitous of emotion from people that are watching in a very like short period of time. For me anyway, when we're talking about writing, it's the message that you're trying to tell, the character that's telling it, and sort of the most important bits of that to get the point across. To tell you how I know that or how I've ever done that, I have to say, maybe a little bit of intuition, just kind of like, breathing life into these characters and saying, well, that person wouldn't say this at that point. And I have an amazing editor in the UK too, who's like my right hand basically when it comes to writing. And he will call me out on it. So it's like, if this character wouldn't do that, but I have them doing that, he's like, no, Anna, no, that's not what happened there. Like, so, that's always helpful when when you're lucky enough to get to like a level where you're actually working with somebody who's done it a lot of times more than you have. But so I guess that if that answers the question, I don't know. Songwriting is a little bit different, just because again, it's like, well, I'm writing in a genre too, and I'm looking at a specific type of music, and even like a specific time frame, and it's like, you want to, well, in that time frame, like what was this artist or an artist expressing, and how are they expressing it? Like a little bit more poetic, a little bit more like simplistic lyrics, a little bit more like, are they more opaque? Is it like, like Alex Turner, I always think, like tells these amazing stories and like lyrics that at first you're like, what the hell does that mean? Like, uh if I think of one of his lyrics, if it comes to me, but they can be sometimes so opaque or so like esoteric, as opposed to like straightforward, where like somebody like John Bon Jovi tells a story about Tommy and Gina, like, what that means. So it's kind of like, okay, what genre are we writing in, and like, what are you saying here? And then, is it rhyme? Can you imagine it fitting into some kind of like melody, which can be tricky for somebody who doesn't really know how to write music.
Well, I'm not surprised that you say it's intuition a little bit because, when we have sang together, I think you have such a gift for making transitional narratives seem really important, even in songwriting or in delivering a song where,
Uh,
even in songwriting, there's always like a line or two that kind of gets you from point A to point B, where if you
yeah,
took it out, it probably wouldn't mean that much. But in the
right.
song, it's really important to get to the end,
Yes, I
last
agree.
couple
Yeah,
seconds. And
for
I
sure.
always felt like when you performed it, I never felt like that line could be removed. I was like,
Yeah.
that belongs there. It needs to be there.
Yeah, I think that that comes from like having a classical background in theater, to be honest with you, and
Mhm.
Shakespeare really, because as we Shakespeare, every single word that was written it means something. Like it doesn't matter anything from an article to a verb to a proper noun. Like Shakespeare meant for that word to be there. And I think that the music that I listen to I give the musicians a lot of credit that every note that was put into that song was meant to be there for a reason. It's to evoke some type of an emotion from the listener. Every lyric was meant to be there. Every ooh or ah was meant to be there. Like I listened to Richard Ashcroft on an interview talk about how like if he couldn't find anything else to loop, he'd loop himself because he wanted the sound of like something going around the song that he was writing. And like so you whether you like the music or you don't like the music, to me, like, or the lyric or whatever, you have to appreciate that that was meant to be there and it's an important part of it. So I think any writing is should be honored that way.
Absolutely. And you do such a great job at it. So,
Oh, thanks.
um, I want to ask you about something logistical, and then I want to
Okay,
bring it back to just the art of what you've written, the play.
great.
But let's
Okay.
talk about, for a moment, the idea of fundraising for it, the idea of bringing attention to it. Because,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen on some of our social or other podcasts, but a theme of this month is pitch to profit, meaning
Oh, I
bringing
haven't.
the conversation, having a conversation about the fact that we need money to make art and we should be paid for the art too. And
Right.
I think
Right.
so often that conversation kind of gets pushed aside because it's a little awkward,
It is
honestly.
for sure. Yeah, it is.
But, you know, on the other hand, we have to do it. We have to
Have
advertise so
to.
that we can deliver
You
this
have to.
product. So,
Yeah.
can you take us a little bit through your journey of, okay, I have this finished product now. Now I need to bankroll it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. So it's funny that again, like, I was just talking to my uncle in the kitchen about this maybe an hour earlier. Like, I'd rather be sitting in front of business people asking for like $1 million than in front of family and friends asking for like $1,000.
Right.
It's much harder. So I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit when you said like as artists we need to be paid for what we do. And I think that there's a lot of us, myself included, who for a very long period of time think, well no, I owe I want the art, like it's so important to me to do the art, and it is. But we do offer something really precious and amazing to the world, you know what I mean? And I think our work and our what we love to do is always worth something. And I think understanding that in yourself is one of the first things to like kind of maybe get through when you know you're gonna have to ask for money. Um, and and I think that believing in a project and that a project has to be needs to find the light of day and that it's that important to you is also going to be a driving force in being able to talk about it in that way. And then you just have to have, I think, a little bit of chutzpah, I guess, and be able to sort of like be okay with like, I'm going to have to sit down and have these conversations. I'm going to have to send 3 to 4 emails over a 3-day period to people and know that like they could be annoyed with me for asking for money, but this is how much I believe in this project. And the fact of the matter is like, I got to get this off the ground. You know what I mean? Like, I know that this is worth getting off the ground. And, um, and I think it is, I will not lie, it is a hard process. I am so grateful to, again, my EP, Melissa Center, who is in New York City and does this stuff, is actually creating a class on how artists can fundraise, which is a really interesting topic, again, that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's a very valuable course, actually.
Totally.
Yeah, you know, it's really invaluable because we sit there and we want to do things, we want to do things, and we want to do things, we don't know how. And like she really instructs you on how to build a crowd fundraiser that is successful enough to start your projects. And I think, you know, having somebody like her in my corner was, like I said, really invaluable because you need somebody who's kind of on the outside going, you got to do this. You got to ask the people again. You've got to do a third email round. You've got to do a DM all over social media. Like it doesn't always. You kind of like, oh, I just did this and I'm saying this and I'm like I'm expecting this and like yuck, you know. But at the same time, when you walk away with like money to start your project, you're like, oh my God, like this
Right.
is real now, you know? And it's like it's a really amazing feeling.
Yeah, and I always come away with the feeling whenever, and I have a little bit of experience in this, but probably in a different light because I haven't been as lucky to or worked in this way. I shouldn't say luck because it was a lot of work to write a play like this and to try to bring it to fruition. So I can only speak from my experience, but I will say whenever I have done something like this, I am just shocked by the support and by sort of the mutual love of art that people share.
Yeah, it's yeah, I think depending on how what your views of money and stuff like that, and again, that's everybody's very personal, has their
Right.
personal stuff with it or whatever. But I think, you know, sometimes, at least for me, I had this idea in my head, like, oh, I'm sorry to ask this person, I'm sorry to ask. And then maybe they wouldn't give the first email or they wouldn't give the second email, but then the third email they gave and they gave like more than you expected. And not only did they give more than expected, they're like, I'm so excited for you doing this. I can't wait to see what the product. You're like, oh shit, like people are excited. People want to see this. People want to see me
Mm,
succeed. And then that gives you a little bit more like like I remember like we got at the like toward the end of the final day we got like a $2,500 like influx and I was just sitting there and I was like, oh my God, you know, like and you're just like somebody else believed in this, you know, or they believe in one of the people that is involved in this and then you go, "This is cool," you know, "This is super cool."
right. Well, thank you for sharing that because I do think it's a really important conversation to have. So I
Yeah.
appreciate your perspective on that. This episode is sponsored by Piano for the Vocalist. Piano for the Vocalist is your ultimate resource for unlocking the skills to self accompany with confidence. This largely free program is focused on teaching singers to use collaborative piano techniques for vocal performance rather than traditional piano skills, empowering you to accompany yourself with ease. Let's take a step back though. So you have this project now that people have um, believed in and want to see come to fruition. But what was the spark that made it happen? What was the thing that put it in action?
So, if I go back to the beginning, like, I was not having a good experience, like, I was not in a great place, and my, side hustle has always been a fitness gig, and, you know, just where I was as an actor, like a minimal amount of success and, you know, just like, but always feeling like I didn't fit into what somebody wanted. Like I was having such a hard time. And I sat down with, at first, I didn't even have a laptop at the time. Like, couldn't even like buy a laptop at the time. And I was living with friends. They were nice enough to, you know, help me and support me, which I am very grateful for. It's been more than one time at this point, but and I just got this. I don't know. I just had this thing in my head about this like this sort of this mysterious this Paris scene and this guy I've lived in Paris and this sort of like kind of memory that this woman had about some past part of her life and then in the present day it kind of got put in front of her and like I just started writing what is ultimately now kind of the manuscript that I'm very slowly finishing as because the screenplay is obviously like at the forefront. But I just found so much joy in the writing of it. And then I was going through a grad school application process for my master's in fine arts. I applied to 2 different schools and I got into them both,
I remember that.
and I went to neither. I got into both of them, and I ended up going, one was actually very competitive, very competitive. I mean, they both were, but GW is extremely competitive. They only take 14 MFA candidates for acting a year for that program. And dare I say, it was the second time I was accepted. And they offered me such a great, Alec Wilde, such a lovely person, and just made such a great offer, I think, but it just didn't it wasn't the time wasn't right. But so I just kept writing, and my father was very sick, and I was going through this whole process, and I spent some time with him, and I finally had enough money to sort of put a laptop on credit. And I remember sitting with my dad, who was a writer, and just saying, I just can like get lost in this, and I just love it. And he said, just keep doing it, just keep writing and reading. You don't know what's going to happen. He's like, maybe nothing will ever come of this, but you'll you'll find something in it. And and then I started, like, to realize, like, I remember writing a scene. I wrote a scene about the rock musician, and it was such a vivid scene to me, and I could just see every aspect of it as I was writing it. And I just read it, and I reread it, and I edited it, and I finally got up the courage to, like, send it to a couple of friends, and their reactions shocked the hell out of me. They were like, "Oh my god, this is so good. It's such good writing." And one of them, like, came back to me, and he was like, "You wrote this?" And I was like,
Yes, yes, I
"Yeah,
did.
yeah."
Thank you.
Exactly. I was like, "Yeah." And, but all 3 of them, and if oddly, all 3 of them were men. I don't know why that happened, but all 3 of them said that this feels like a movie. And I thought, and I had been saying, like, kind of off the cuff to my aunt, I said, "Well, I think I'm writing, a series, or I'm writing a movie, or I don't know, I don't know what it is." And I never really necessarily had a plan for it until people kept saying, like, "I see everything. I see it." Um, and and then I thought, well, I should probably take a class, because I don't know how the hell to write a screenplay. And I know this is a manuscript right now. So I took a screenplay class at Grub Street, actually, in Boston, with a guy named Mike Zendeas, who's just, I mean, I gotta credit, he never wants me to, but, like, I gotta credit this guy with so much, because he was the very first person who said, like, your ideas are interesting, and they're worth some, because I'm like, it's cheesy, it's kind of a love story, it takes place in Paris about a rock musician and an actress, and everybody's gonna know that it's like semi-autobiographical and blah blah blah. And he's like, so what? He's like, it's fun, it's good, it's what people want. It's like, it's hot, it's interesting, it's fun, it's like, and I'm like, oh. Oh, so, like, the things that I think and the things that are interesting to me might be interesting to other people. I, like, literally never thought that. I thought, like, that they wouldn't be. So, he just encouraged me a lot with the piece, and encouraged me to the point where, like, I finished very quickly the first, or, like, an early draft of the screenplay, enough that I, again, had the guts to pass it around to some people who thought, "There's something here. This is an early draft. There's something here." And people were interested in doing a reading of it in New York, like last winter, and it got some really great legs and feedback from that, and enough to start attracting people to the project. So I thought, well, and then that's where you think with the financing too. You're like, well, okay, I like 20 people going like, yes, we want to do this. Yes, this is interesting. Yes, come up with the money. Then you're like, I'm not alone here. That makes it a little easier.
Yeah, it becomes not just for you.
Right.
If I could add maybe part of my own story in this,
Sure.
I was taking a teacher training course, and the guy who was running it sort of laughed and said, I named my studio after the city, not my name. Like, I didn't call it X name vocal studio because I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to do this. I wanted to see if it caught on first. And I've always regretted that, because now I really want people to associate what I've built with me.
Yeah.
And so when I went and opened up my studio, I was really I this person was a mentor to me. I really enjoyed his work, etc. And I said, well, respectfully, I'm going to do the opposite and I'm going to name it after myself.
I love
Because if
that.
you're telling me
I love
that
that.
you wish you did this, and he's been doing it like 20 years now, that you wish you named it after yourself,
And I'm
I'm not
gonna
going to wait 20 years to do
take
that.
that
And now
cue. That's awesome.
people are like, when people tell the name of their studio, what they've built, the title of their book, there's always some great story behind it. It has some branding behind it, and people go, oh, well, you just named it after yourself. And I said, no, that's really important
I
because
think it
I
is.
named it after myself, and then I wanted everyone to know. And similar to you, where you sent out your book and it became bigger than just what you initially thought.
Yeah.
We recently had discussions about changing the name of the studio because it's no longer just mine, right? Like
Yeah.
I wanted to associate with it. Here's the flip side of the coin where now it feels like I do teach, but I'm also on the administrative side. And we've had more teachers kind of give it their own spin and it's developed its own thing. And I said, well, maybe it's bigger than my own name. So it just reminded me of that a
Yeah,
little
I mean
bit.
it's totally true. I have to say though, because Arabella is what actually attracted me to this
Oh,
studio
really?
initially. Yeah, it's Arabella. Like I told
So
you,
it worked.
Arabella, like the Arctic Monkeys, Arabella. I'm like Arabella. I have to
Yes.
learn singing at a place called Arabella.
Oh, great.
Um, yeah, it's such a great song off of AM. Like Alex Turner needs me to plug him.
Yeah.
But but anyway, but no, I mean, I think that that's true of art, right? So it's like you eventually, it's like you kind of you have to stay a little bit open, and where this can be a really challenging thing, and I'm definitely coming across it now. You find like okay, there I would never want it to be under a stamp or an umbrella that wasn't mine
Right.
because it is my work. But at the same time, if I don't let other creative like when we cast the reading, I cast it with like I really didn't. I took a lot of chances because I was like, well, in my head, this person was this type of person or whatever, had this look, or I had this person in mind when I was writing it. But let me take a chance and hear a different voice and see what comes of that. And
Mm,
maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work. Maybe it'll change it and maybe it won't change it. But and it's the same thing, with the writing of it. Like if I didn't send it back and forth to Lloyd at this point, like it's Lloyd and my like I couldn't ever stand up on a podium and say like I wrote this and it's all me and I wouldn't even want to. I like there's no way that if Lloyd Peters wasn't involved in this project that it would be as good as it is. So I think in order to that's the thing about art is like it's really got to be expansive and so other people's feelings have to be involved there. Like what good is a film if I don't have actors who are able to bring their heart and soul to it. And I have to allow that, like you have to allow that. You have to let
yes.
that expansion happen. Otherwise, like I would still be like writing the piece by myself in a bedroom somewhere, like
Right. No, I totally agree. And by the way, you said, you weren't sure this was kind of like somewhat of an autobiography. I would absolutely read that. The last time that Anna and I spoke, she was leaving the studio and said, oh, I got into GW. I'm on my way to screen. The next thing I know, I'm opening my email. I didn't go, but I wrote an entire screenplay. I was like, well, that makes sense to me. So I would absolutely read that. So I'm glad it is. Where can we find more information about this, or where can we find your information?
I wish I had an easy answer for that. But it's all in development. I would say right
Okay.
now, I would say right now the best thing to do is we still have the page up on Cause Match. Whether you give or you don't give, at least you'd be able to see the video and kind of understand a little bit more about what the movie is about. So it's causematch.com/liner notes. The working title of the film right now is Liner Notes. It has been for quite some time. So that would be the first place. And then where when we're so close off of the fundraiser that the money's not even in the bank account yet, right? So
Mm,
you all those little things that's like, we need a website, we need like an LLC for like
Right.
all these things that we're starting to like embark on, so that people do have the information and know kind of that it's a piece in the works. There will be a website, there will be all these things happening. And so really right now it's kind of just a cause match page, but that there's that informational video, and I think that that is kind of tells the story in a nutshell a little bit.
Sure. And Anna, as things come to development too, if you want to send it our way after, we can always add it to the
Yeah,
notes on the YouTube page,
that
etc.
that'd be great. Awesome.
So
Thank
I
you.
always end our chats with the same question.
Okay.
If you were to give one piece of practical advice to our listeners, what would it be?
I don't know how practical this is. I'm not good at practicality, Arabella. You know me well enough to know that. Listening to my aunt and uncle who are like, okay, is this like, are you being practical? I'm like, not good at that. But I would say, really, especially as an artist, listen to yourself and allow for different things to come in, because you don't know what's going to happen. There's no losing this game unless you quit, which is, obvious, or should be obvious, I guess. But I think just really listening to yourself. And the great thing about people's advice is that you don't have to take it.
I would say that's pretty practical.
Is it
I have to.
practical?
I heard two very good pieces of practical advice in there. You would think that I always say that people pay a lot for common sense. And you
Yeah,
would
I mean,
think that it's common sense that if the only way to, lose is to quit the game. But, sometimes people need to hear it.
I think as an artist, if you're in touch with yourself and what you love, your intuition is really good. And I think you know what you want. And I think that, and so another teacher of mine said to me, does it make you feel expansive or does it make you feel contracted? And you always
Mm,
want to go on the side that makes you feel expansive. Like, is it more open and giving and bringing more to you, or is it like, oh, I'm going to try to fit into this and see if it works? So I think that that to me really spoke to me a lot.
that's great. Thank you for all of
Thank
that
you.
advice. Thank you for coming on and chatting with us. I'm so excited to watch the project unfold and
Thank
to
you.
learn more about it as some of these things come to fruition. I have no doubt that the next time I open my inbox, it will be like, not only have I written a screenplay, we now have a musician on board, we now have a director on board. So I look forward to every time I see a email from you. I know the next step is coming, so
Well,
keep us posted.
the next step is definitely there. Like, we're in production conversations with some partners and stuff like that. So I mean, we're looking to shoot early mid fall of the coming of 2025. So for the short.
That's
Not
so
the
exciting.
full length is down the road a little bit, because
Please send us everything as it comes.
we'll
And
leave.
I'm sure this isn't the last chat we'll have and thing we share. So
Yeah.
thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much, Arabella, and I will see you next week in Boston.
Sounds good.